Have you been wondering this? How can I get better connected to my teen when they seem to hate me? Hi, I'm Dr. Paul Jenkins, a child and family psychologist.
And I'm Vicki Jenkins, a speech-language pathologist, but more importantly, a mother of 4 children.
You've raised 4 teenagers.
I have. And we've got 3 powerful tips for you today.
And even a special bonus, so watch for it. As a professional psychologist, I have interviewed literally thousands by this point of teenagers, and I get a very consistent message from them. You know what irritates and annoys them the most? Somebody's trying to control my life. I doubt that your teen actually hates you, but they're going through some developmental stages where control is really important, and so they get very sensitive, and they probably feel like you're trying to control them.
Right, and that brings in some strong feelings. You know, it reminds me of something really funny one of our children said to you. One time you were having a conversation with our son. I think we imposed some limits.
Restrictions,
that they didn't like.
consequences.
And I remember him saying to you, "Dad, sometimes I feel like I hate you. I know that I don't. I know I love you, but sometimes I feel like I hate you."
I still remember that.
It's just so
I
funny.
love you. I don't know what I'd do without you, but I feel like I hate you.
They probably don't hate you, but what they really are saying is, I am really frustrated. I want control. I want respect, and I don't feel like I have it. Sometimes they feel out of control in their own life, their own body, their own experience, and they have to project that frustration, and it often goes on to the parent.
You're going to be the target.
Yeah.
So that leads us into our first tip. Look inside of yourself and just check to see how much you really want to control them. Just check, okay? The self-awareness will do much for you. And if you're trying to control them or change their behavior, just notice that, because I promise you that they do. Notice it. Now, there's things that you can do about that. And you may be able to start detaching from the outcomes a little bit and realizing that really your job is not to control them. You're not very good at that anyway. Let's face it. Your job is
to love them no matter what, and even if.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
And you did too. You know this. You know that your
Right.
job is to love them no matter what and even if. We get distracted though and try to control their behavior sometimes.
You know, this is so challenging for us as parents, especially with the teenage years. We do love them, and that is why we want the best outcomes for them. And that is sometimes why we start to think that we need to control their behavior to make sure that they have a good experience. However, anytime you start doing that, the controlling of the outcome, it comes off to them that you care more about the outcome than you do them. And that's why it's really, really
that's a
tricky.
good point.
That's why they channel all that frustration and those pent-up feelings towards you in the form of hatred.
You said a phrase that caught my attention because this is where we get stuck. Make sure that they.
Right.
You can't make sure that they anything, really. That's up to them. Make sure that they do well in school. I had one mom who literally said this to me in my office. She said, "Well, what am I supposed to do then? Just let him fail?" And I'm like, "What do you mean let him? Like that's up to you?" But we get it in our heads all the time that it's our job to make sure that they whatever. No, that's their job. Okay? Our job is to love them no matter what and even if. When you're doing your job well, you're going to feel some pain. And I'm sorry about that, but that's part of the reality. It's hard to watch someone that you love making decisions that you disagree with. And that's kind of where we get stuck as parents sometimes. There's some classic research that showed us that there are 2 elements of having authority. Now think about what we're trying to accomplish here is to establish a relationship with our teenager, right? They seem to hate us. We've already talked about how that has to do with control.
You know, we don't really want to have control of their lives, but we do want to have influence in their life.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes by being part of that, at least, comes by being seen as an authority in the best way.
And let's go with that authority
Okay,
idea
right.
for a minute, because the research shows this, that authority requires 2 components. If you think of it as needing both of these, you have to be able to set and enforce appropriate limits, and you have to be seen as a provider of good times and good things.
Right. So our first tip is to increase the fun, smile more, laugh more, have family game times, have wonderful meals together.
When your kids see you as a provider of good times and good things, it puts you in a position where they're going to take you more seriously when it comes to the limit setting. And we'll come back to that in just a minute. Good times and good things. You mentioned meals, for example. Sometimes I had two moms in one of our recent coaching groups who were so frustrated because they would make these healthy meals and the kids would just turn up their noses to it or go get fast food or something else. Right. Think about the meals for a moment. What are you creating that's appealing to them? And we can keep it healthy too. Your sister's really good at this.
Yeah, my sister actually is a fabulous cook, and she put together a list of foods that are healthy but are pretty guaranteed that your teenagers will enjoy them.
The teens will like them. In fact, go to the URL on the screen. We've captured those recipes for you. Just let us know where to send it. drpauljenkins.com/recipes. We'll get that in your inbox.
So the other aspect of authority is being able to set healthy limits and enforce them.
The enforcement really has to do mostly with consequences. Because remember, you can't make sure that they obey.
Right.
But you can make sure that appropriate consequences follow whatever their choice is. So let's just do a little adjustment for a minute about how we think about consequences. Consequences aren't there as a punishment or as some kind of a punitive measure because they didn't listen to you. It's not about that. It's about there's a package, okay? And when you choose this, it includes these things. And when you choose that, it includes those things. And the consequences are just something that is included in the package. So rather than punishing them, you are simply honoring their choice. Now, does that feel a little better? When you can follow through consistently and effectively with appropriate consequences and you stay calm voice, calm face, calm body, where you don't get all tied into it. You simply acknowledge that it's part of the package.
And I have to say with teens, this is going to take a real team effort because coming up with consequences that you can enforce, sometimes you have to be really creative. Sometimes you have to think quite a bit. And you sometimes have to be okay with kind of a delayed consequence too. So think about it.
Right.
It's really tricky because sometimes in the heat of the moment, or the heat of the decision, you want to throw something out that is really not going to be very enforceable or very helpful. And so take some time and think about it.
We're sometimes afraid of thinking. But honestly, if you took half of the time that you're spending fighting with your teenager and just half of that time to think about appropriate, effective consequences that don't require cooperation that you can enforce whether you have their cooperation or not, that time will be very, very well spent. And you'll be in a position where you can do this. You know, I'm thinking of a dad who was so frustrated because his kids, he had, I think, 2 or 3 teenagers in his home, and they would not cooperate with him on whatever it was. I think it was a screen time battle or something. I don't know if you've ever had those with your teens. And he decided, okay, I'm going to think this through. I'm going to come up with something that I can enforce. He's a welder. And he used his brilliant mind to come up with a box. He designed this box that he made out of steel that the power cords were inside of, and he could lock that box and they couldn't get the plugs out. I don't know what all the design was, but the point is he used his creative mind to come up with a consequence that didn't require their cooperation. He didn't have to trust them to not use the screens. He could turn it off and lock it. Brilliant. And he stopped fighting with his teenager as a result. Let's wrap this back into where we started. How to get better connected with your teen when they seem to hate you. I hope we've dispelled that a little bit, that they don't actually hate you. This is about control. It's about you staying in control. What do you see that doing for your connection? If you are more calm, if you are more confident, can you see that that's going to naturally bubble over into how you interact with your teen and hopefully create that better level of connection?
As you get kind of clear about offering consequences that you can control, it's interesting because then you give them their choice and you honor their choice, and you let go of the outcome, and you really are okay with whichever one they have chosen, and then they see their respect for you grows because you're honoring their choice, and they see that you are treating them as the adult they are becoming.
Hopefully that gets you thinking. We're not leaving you hanging. The next video is 5 things that every parent of a teenager needs to know. You're going to want to cue that one up next.